Today on Driving and Dragons, I'm going to respond to a much larger channel. Not that that's anything special or new for us, the YouTube types, but I kind of always started this off saying that I wasn't ever going to do some of the more generic stuff that you see out there. Everybody does reactions and responses, and everybody does lists and that sort of thing. And now, thanks to the DM Lair, it looks like I'm going to do both. So, earlier today, the DM Lair channel, which is one of my, it's a D&D channel that I actually enjoy quite a bit. It's really kind of funny because it's equal parts incredibly annoying and infuriating, and equal parts insightful and good content. Very well produced videos. He generally has good ideas, has very good working knowledge of the rules and game system. He's obviously been playing for a very, very long time, and really has things put together and has basically made a business out of it. He does have atrociously annoying skits in the beginning of his videos. I'm not gonna lie, I want to punch him through the camera every time. I straight up skip his players around the table, wizard, barbarian, dragon-headed dude table skits. They really grate on my nerves. But there's definitely a lot worse channels out there you can watch, because he does have good content. He does tend to make good posts, and he does tend to provide a lot of really good information, particularly for newer DMs. But today he came out and he posted a video, I believe it was called, why do DMs keep doing this, or DMs need to stop doing this. This steals player agency. And immediately upon watching that video, I put together two things. It gave me two ideas that I needed to hit on. One, and this will come later because obviously it needs a little bit more prep, I'm going to do a list video on some of the most overused terms in tabletop role-playing games, in particular in terms of online discussions, forum boards, that sort of thing. This is going to be things like player agency. This is going to be things like railroading. These terms they've lost all their meaning. Not to get off on a tangent that starts the old flame war going, but it's almost like the term racist. Racist lost pretty much all of its meaning the minute everything anybody ever did, as long as a certain person disagreed with it, became racist. Or I refer to them as the ist-phobes. You're this ist or that phobe, and all teeth gone out of it. It's almost no longer an insult. It went from being one of the most vile things you can call a person, one of the most damning, one of the most damning things that you could say about a person was you're a racist, or you're bigoted in this way or that. Now it's lost all of its teeth because you got people who come out and literally, oh, you disagree with me? You're some kind of something that ends in ist or phobe, and that makes you an evil person. And when all the rest of the world looks around, it's like, them disagreeing with you doesn't make them an evil person. That word loses all of its teeth. The same thing happens in our hobby with words like the biggest one that slaps straight in the center of my head is railroading, because it is so misused on such a regular basis. When you get some of these players who basically, anytime they don't get exactly what they want, you're railroading. So he came out and he talked about player agency, stealing player agency. And the example he gives, and the thing that kind of set him off on his rant, is introducing the big baddie, the big bad evil guy, through a Final Fantasy cutscene. It's an impossible fight. You've stolen player agency because it's an impossible fight. They've got no choice but to lose. That's not stealing player agency. He is just flat out wrong on this one. And I get where he's coming from. You don't want to go into Final Fantasy cutscenes. You don't want to go into long soliloquies and narrative descriptions on your game. I mean, he had another great video. I think I'm going to link both of these below, like he needs my help. But he had another great video where he's like things that professional GMs and D&D streaming shows do that you shouldn't do. And he made a very good point. They're telling a story and producing a product where everybody's working together to produce a product for you to consume. You're playing a game for everybody to enjoy, and your monologues are not anywhere near as good as you seem to think they are. Even if you're J.R.R. Tolkien reborn and are putting out the most beautiful descriptions in the most detailed world that everybody's in love with, they want to read it for themselves. They don't want you to read it to them. So he goes into this, and he's right on that front. But where he's talking about, he goes, oh, you know, nothing can do this. You know, you've introduced this big bad evil guy, and everybody knows there's just no chance, so they may as well go along with it. Well, I'm a big believer in bringing a certain gravity and realism to your table, to your worlds. So you don't have to have a, quote, realistic world, because we got magic and dragons and all that kind of stuff in it. But what you do need to have at your table, regardless of what system you're running, and regardless of how realistic the world itself is in terms of what kind of things are in it, you know, you may have nothing supernatural whatsoever in it and be running Gumshoe or some other in some other real world investigation game, but you want your world to feel like it is a real place, that it's lived in, that your players are not the center of the universe. They need to feel like they're not the center of the universe, because other things are happening around them, other things matter. And one of the things that can happen is an impossible situation. There's a lot of crossover between people who play Dungeons and Dragons and people who happen to have watched Star Trek. And you had the Kobayashi Maru test that was, you know, that came about in Wrath of Khan. It's the impossible scenario. You have to face the no-win situation. And it helps to have your players grounded in a situation where they understand there's real consequences to being stupid. And they understand how far they have to go, how careful they have to be around this guy. I'm not a huge big bad evil guy person myself. I'm not saying that there's never a leader of the giant army or anything in my games, but you know, the commander of the Star Army and the Great Imperial Armada, if you kill him, his number 2 just takes over. Those kind of Great Imperial armies have these things called org charts, and there's a guy who's one level down who can take. They tend to do okay with the head of the snake being cut off, so to speak, unless you're doing a real high fantasy thing. And this is literally Sauron, and his magic and his presence in the world is literally what's keeping it together. Or, you know, you got a cult of Vecna that has 1,000 sects in the world that are all tying back to his manipulations. But in general, I steer away from that. But let's say you don't. Let's say that you're a big bad evil guy kind of DM, kind of GM. You want to have that big epic battle type situation. Nothing wrong with introducing him early when he's going to wipe out the party. Maybe he does TPK the party. Maybe they just push things to the point that he TPKs the party, and they all get to roll new characters and continue the same adventure from a different perspective. And part of that perspective is these great heroes just got wiped out because they decided they were going to bite off more than they could chew. What you have to do, though, is you have to make sure that the players have options. They have to have ways to get away from it. They have to have a diplomatic way to talk their way out of it. Are they going to throw themselves on the ground and cower? Are they going to turn around and run? Are they going to sneak out dressed as the women? Are they going to... There's 100,000 things they could do other than go fight the big bad evil guy, lose, and let the DM say, ha ha ha, I don't have time to deal with you now, I'll leave you to my lieutenants and fly away. The DM Lair video presents it that way, as if this is your option, is to be introduced to be my big bad evil guy, and you no longer have agency. I took it away from you because there's a predetermined outcome. That is complete crap. You know what? sometimes your players are in a battle. And that battle, and I went over this in my mass scale combat video. Sometimes they're going to go into a battle, and it doesn't matter what they do or how many orcs they kill or what happens, they're going to lose that big battle because the odds are so overwhelming. There's so many external factors against them that they simply are not going to win. But where you cross the line into stealing player agency is when you either A, take control of them. You start saying things like, you just stand there with your jaw slack and you can't move, you have to sit there and all this stuff happens to you and you try to defend yourself, but you can't. That's taking away player agency, because when did they say they were going to try to defend themselves? Heck, for all you know, they may worship power and decide, oh, this guy's so powerful, I'm just going to go be a supplicant now. I'm going to walk forward and kneel down and offer my services because that's the way I've decided I want to go as a character. That's taking away player agency. And forcing them into a single chain of events is robbing player agency. It doesn't matter what you say or do. Big bad guy is going to whip your butt in this courtyard. He's going to stomp you down and waste all your resources. He's going to beat the crap out of you, and he's going to say his little monologue about how he doesn't have time for this, or he's going to get distracted and have to leave before he can, quote, finish the job and teach you your lesson. That's when you start treading on player agency. You have to allow the players to respond in a way. They have to be able to interrupt his speech. If one of them wants to chuck a javelin at him while he's sitting there running his mouth, you have to let him do it. And now the results may not be the best thing in the world, and the results may be a TPK. But as long as you're allowing the players to handle the scenario the way they choose to, you're not robbing player agency. And I'm going to finish this up with a bit of a dovetail off of that theory. A thing about player agency. The hot take I've got on this: you are robbing player agency when you start doing things like interfering with them dying. I don't mean fudging dice rolls, making sure that the random goblin doesn't accidentally stab them in the ribs and wipe them out, get the 3d20 roll in a row and the old instant death variant rule or something of that nature. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about having a situation that maybe where you start kind of slanting things a little bit in their favor to try and help guarantee their survival because maybe they made a mistake or maybe you overdid things. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when you start more or less making up for their bad decisions. You introduce the big bad evil guy and you make it as obvious as can be that you ain't beating this guy. He is bigger and badder than anything you've ever come across. You have no chance. And your party still wants to draw iron and charge and fight for him. Give them their heroic death. Let him wipe the party. That's what they chose. And if they do that and you save their butt, you have just taken away player agency, because you have taught your party, you have taught your players that no matter how stupid what they do is, no matter how many signs they ignore, they are the center of the universe. The world is not bigger than they are. So in order for the universe to survive, you're going to make sure they survive. You've taken away the agency of them making bad decisions and reaping the consequences of it. The old expression, they play stupid games, let them win stupid prizes. So that's kind of the dovetail I have off of that, is I honestly think that you are taking more player agency away by excessively trying to rig the game to keep them alive, to rig the game to get them where they want to be, to manipulate events to kind of give them what they want. To a certain extent you have to, because you want to have a fun game. You want them to feel like they accomplished something. You want to give them some reward. And if a player really wants something to happen to their character, if you can find a way to engineer that organically, then that's a wonderful thing. But if all you're doing is tooling everything that happens around making sure that your players make it through, and you can't make your stormtroopers miss everything. If all your goblin archers are stormtroopers and they're just flinging crossbow bolts into the wall, what does it matter at that point? You've taken away their agency, because no matter what they do, it's going to turn out in their favor. It may take them a little bit longer to get where they want to be, but it's going to go their way, because that's how you've engineered your game. So that's my take on it. I think he is dead wrong when it comes to the big bad evil guy introduction situation. I think he's dead wrong when it comes to impossible situations, or situations that only have one real obvious way out, being robbing player agency. And like I said, I get where he's coming from, but I think he's just dead wrong on that front. And then last but not least, remember that you can take away player agency by doing more than just, steamrolling them into some particular set of circumstances. You can take away player agency in more ways than just simply hand of God taking control of their character and saying, you do this and you do that. You can take away player agency by engineering a game that they can't lose. Go back and watch A Nice Place to Visit Twilight Zone episode. Guy ends up dying. He's a criminal. He ends up in the afterlife. Everything goes his way. Rolls craps every single time he throws the dice. Always hits the roulette wheel. Always 21 on blackjack. Always winning. And eventually he's like, man, there's no fun in this because I can't lose. I don't want to be in heaven anymore. Send me to the other place. And the guy says, who told you were in heaven? You are in the other place. You're in hell all along. Hell happens to be, it's boring because you always win. Don't do that to your players. That takes away their agency just as much as grabbing them by the nose and dragging them through the plot points of your fledgling novel that you're trying to create. So that's all I've got to say on that, and hopefully we get a little bit more in the future out of this.